I know you're going to look at the video, look at me, look at my background, and say, what the hell's going on here? Am I in some type of Bears football bizarro world? The answer is no. Yes, I am about to loudly and proudly advocate for Sterling Sharpe being chosen as one of the 3 senior candidates for the 2023 Pro Football Hall of Fame class. And just as importantly, I'm here to tell you why you should too. Because all the team loyalty, team hatred, everything else goes out the window. When I see a grave injustice in the Hall of Fame process, I'm going to call this crap out. And to me, I don't know if there's a single greater Hall of Fame injustice in recent years, from my perspective anyways, than Sterling Sharpe. He should have been in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. He should have been in the Pro Football Hall of Fame a long time ago. The fact in the middle of 2022 that I'm still having to talk about Sterling Sharpe and make a case for him to be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame instead of just talking about how great of a player he was is sad to me. And many of you, Packers fans that watch this, Bears fans that watch this, fans of football and football history that watch this, like you know damn good and well that Sterling Sharpe passed the eyeball test of a Hall of Famer, the statistical test of a Hall of Famer, and all of that. But for some of you that may not be as familiar, some of you that were younger that didn't actually get to watch Sterling Sharpe throughout his career, let me give you a relevant, recent comparison of a player who had a similar career to Sterling Sharpe. And not only is he in the Hall of Fame, he was a first ballot Hall of Famer, and that is Megatron Calvin Johnson. During Calvin Johnson's career, he was a 6-time Pro Bowler and a 3-time All-Pro. And that's only in the course of 9 seasons. So, and there's no question he was dominant. There was no question he was a Hall of Famer. Again, he passed the eyeball test. And he also passed the statistical test. 7 seasons of 1,000-plus receiving yards. It's not like he always played in high-powered, prolific offenses with an elite quarterback. Matthew Stafford, a good quarterback. But you got to remember the first few years of Megatron's career, that included the 0-16 Lions in 2008. The first couple of years, Stafford wasn't healthy the full season, so it wasn't really until 2011 that that shit really kicked into gear. But Calvin Johnson, in a less than ideal situation where everybody knew he was a primary target, everybody knew he was going to be the major focus. He had 5 seasons over 1,200 receiving yards. He was a 2-time league leader in receiving yards. The 2 most notable seasons, obviously, the one for 1,681 yards and the other one for 1,964 yards. He had 4 total seasons where he was in the top 5 in terms of receiving yards, 2 times in the top 5 in NFL in terms of receptions. He led the league once in touchdown receptions, had 4 seasons of 10-plus receiving TDs. 1 time he was top 3 in the AP vote for Offensive Player of the Year. All of that in 9 seasons. Now, personally, I was a bit surprised to one degree that Calvin Johnson was a first ballot Hall of Famer, because I looked at him and I said, well, what's so different between, let's say, a him and maybe like a Patrick Willis? Shorter careers for both of them, but similar level of dominance for the time they played. Honestly, the difference is that twofold probably. 1, there was a bit of a sympathy factor for Calvin Johnson playing in Detroit all of his career. 2 is the fact that he played wide receiver, which naturally, no matter how much anybody says, they always gravitate towards offense versus defense when it comes to these type of voting things. But everybody probably agrees, I think, that Calvin Johnson was a Hall of Fame player. Whether or not he was first ballot Hall of Famer would be a different discussion, but he ultimately ended up being. To which I would say all Calvin Johnson was Sterling Sharpe with 2 more years on his career. Really. And when you look at Sterling Sharpe and his 7 seasons in a much different era from 1988 to 1994, you talk about a guy that was a 5-time Pro Bowler, a 3-time first-team All-Pro. He had 5 seasons of 1,000 or more receiving yards. 5 seasons of 1,000 or more receiving yards. If he had another 2 seasons, it would have been 7, just like Calvin Johnson. He had 3 seasons over 1,200 yards, which with 2 more seasons played, would have been probably 5 seasons, especially when you talk about his next 2 seasons, would have been 95 and 96, the first of the 2 of 3 back-to-back MVP seasons for Brett Favre in Green Bay. Sterling Sharpe had 2 seasons over 1,400 receiving yards. He had 4 seasons where he was in the top 5 of the league in receiving yards. Think about that, just like Calvin Johnson. He was a 3-time league leader in receptions. And when you think about Sterling Sharpe in his time, you got to remember that for the vast majority of his career, he did not have stellar quarterback play. Some of you are going to point to Mikowski's 89 season. Yeah, that's about it for Mikowski. And you're going to point to, well, he played with Favre the first couple of years. But yeah, Favre's 92 and 93 seasons weren't exactly stellar or banner. 94 was, even though that was a year that Favre didn't make the Pro Bowl, probably should have. When you look at his numbers, though, he's a two-time league leader in touchdown receptions. He had 4 seasons, just like Megatron, of 10-plus receiving TDs. Similar to Megatron in terms of so many opposing defenses were focused on stopping him, and they couldn't fucking stop him. They just couldn't. Twice, Sterling Sharpe was voted in the top 5 in terms of the AP Offensive Player of the Year as a wide receiver. All of this in 7 seasons. So my argument here is if you are a firm believer that Calvin Johnson was a Hall of Famer, then to me you have to be with Sterling Sharpe as well. Because the differences are minimal and only a byproduct of Calvin Johnson playing 2 more seasons. That's it. And like I said, you want to associate Sharpe with playing with Brett Favre. You got to keep the context of when he played with Brett Favre in respects to Brett Favre's career. One of the real tragedies of the NFL of my lifetime is seeing Sterling Sharpe's career end after 7 seasons in such a shitty way. I mean, there's no other way for me to put it. Such a fluke injury. And we were robbed of one of the greats of our lifetimes. I mean, when you think about Sterling Sharpe, you look at other guys that had short bodies of work but elite level work like Terrell Davis and Tony Baselli. And you say to yourself, okay, if Sterling Sharpe was so great, how come he didn't get in? Well, because at some point in time there was a standard in the Hall of Fame, which clearly has went away in recent years, of saying you had to have some type of longevity to your career. Well, once Terrell Davis got in, basically really off of 4 regular seasons and his great elite performances in the playoffs, and Tony Baselli got in basically off of 5 to 6 real seasons of high-level production. Like, they got in, but meanwhile, Sterling Sharpe waited, and eventually, once those glass ceilings were broke with Terrell Davis and then with Tony Baselli, Sterling Sharpe had unfortunately elapsed as a modern-era candidate and fell to the senior ballot. But what's crazy to me is when you look at Sterling Sharpe, just like with those other 2 names, he was literally the second best player in his era. Sharpe was in his 7th season. And you might even argue, was Terrell Davis even the second best running back of his time? Maybe, maybe not. And especially in that 4-year stretch at the beginning of his career. Maybe Tony Baselli was the second best left tackle of his time. Maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. But we can point to Sterling Sharpe as being the second best receiver of his era. And the only reason he wasn't number 1 was because he played in the same era as the GOAT, Jerry Rice. And what would Jerry Rice's numbers have been if he played in Green Bay with Mikowski and a young Favre? What would Sterling Sharpe's numbers have been if he got to have Joe Montana and fucking Steve Young throwing him the damn football for all 7 years of his career? Think about that. And when you look at all of the candidates for the 2023 Pro Football Hall of Fame senior class, like you had the 25 or whatever semifinalists announced, there are certainly guys that I look at that over the course of the next 3 years, they need to find their spot in Ken. Ken Anderson's one. His numbers are better than both Bradshaw and Staubach in that 70s era. Same thing with Stabler. Better than all 3 of those quarterbacks that are actually in the Hall of Fame. Is it Anderson's fault that his team didn't win a Super Bowl? How would he have done if he got to play around all those Hall of Famers like Staubach had? Or like Ken Stabler had? Or like Terry Bradshaw had? Or fucking Bob Greasy did? He should have long since been in the Hall of Fame, and hopefully he gets in sooner rather than later. Randy Gradishar should have already been in. Chuck Howley should have long since been in. Lavi Dilweg, if you don't know what I'm talking about, look it up. One of the great ends in the early history of the league. He was 5 times all-pro in his first 5 years in the league. Like Roger Craig, whose numbers I think look better in the way that modern running backs are deployed. Like he had seasons, he was top 5 and 7 in the league in receptions as a running back. Bob Kuchenberg, multiple-time finalist, unfortunately passed away a couple of years ago. Like these to me are all the guys that I look at that should be in at some point in time in the next 3 years. But when it comes to the Hall of Fame, what it should not be about is, well, we like this guy, so we want to put him in. Or we have some underrepresentation at a position, we want to put him in. Or this guy's waited the longest, they should put in. Or the fans would respond the best to this one. Or the marketing and attention that would be garnered by putting this person in is the best. There are so many reasons to not put somebody in the Hall of Fame. The reason, and the only really good reason to put somebody in the Hall of Fame, is because they are the most worthy and the most deserving. And I argue, when you look at resumes and all of the other competition, Sterling Sharpe's resume is unique. He is the clear-cut number one candidate. I'll argue anybody on this point compared to the other semifinalists that he's going against. Like, if you look at the other semifinalist or wide receivers, Mark Clayton, where that came from, I don't even know. Wouldn't even have been one of the 10 guys I thought of that was most deserving in terms of wide receivers at the senior level. But he's there. Same thing with Stanley Morgan, and I would say the same thing. Sterling Sharpe's resume is clearly better than both of those guys. Those are very good players. Sterling Sharpe was elite all-world. Nobody else, none of his competition at the wide receiver position, nobody else in this class has the same resume as Sterling Sharpe. So if it is about inducting the 3 truly most worthy candidates to the Pro Football Hall of Fame out of the 2023 class for the senior pool, then Sterling Sharpe has to be, damn it, one of those 3 choices, and he needs to be number 1. If you're asking me who I would put in at the other 2, it'd probably be Anderson and Howley. You say, well, what about Gradishar? I feel like Howley's waited even longer. I might like his resume slightly more. If you told me it was Ken Anderson, Sterling Sharpe, and Gradishar, I'm like, that's a great class. That's a class that I could be happy with. But if you find out in the near future that the 2023 senior class doesn't have Sterling Sharpe as one of the 3 inductees, then you know something is fundamentally broken with the process. And this is not a matter of individual perspectives or different opinions. This is just a matter of fact. Nobody has the resume that Sterling Sharpe does in terms of his peers, in terms of his competition in this pool. He should have already long since been in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. It's a shame I still have to talk about him not being in the middle of 2022, but hopefully he's done right by the process in 2023, because he is as glaring an omission as any damn body.